Chapter 61 Hotpot. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After signing up, Sui talked with Su Shaoqin about starting rehearsals the next day. Then, she headed back to the dorm. It was getting colder, and she needed to get that sweater knitted. Just as she arrived, she ran into Yi Nuanyuan downstairs. Nuanyuan, what are you doing here all by yourself? Where's your brother? Sui asked. Yi Nuanyuan pointed towards home. My brother and uncle are playing with coal balls. I came to see my sister. Sui paused. She just mentioned it yesterday, and they were already making coal balls. That was fast. Sui took Nuanyuan's hand. Let's go back and see. As soon as they walked into the yard, they saw a pile of coal in the corner. Zhou Jinchuan was bent over, mixing coal dust with a shovel. He'd taken off his coat and was just in his shirt, sleeves rolled up, showing his forearms. He didn't seem to mind the cold. Xia Xiaojun and Yi Xiaowu were working together, forming the coal into briquettes. 2 rows of honeycomb-shaped coals were already drying in the sun. Sui hurried over to Yi Xiaowu. You got this done fast. You must be tired. Yi Xiaowu grinned. Nah, my uncle said it might rain in a couple of days, so we wanted to get it done and dried early. Sui nodded, then looked at Zhou Jinchuan and Xia Xiaojun. Thanks for all the hard work. I'll make some tea. Zhou Jinchuan stopped and straightened up. No need. I also got the lamb and the pot. Go take a look. Xia Xiaojun added with a smile, we're not thirsty. We're just looking forward to a lamb hot pot tonight after we finish these coal balls. Sui was surprised and quickly went into the kitchen. Sure enough, there was a big leg of lamb on the cutting board and a brand new copper pot. Even the charcoal for the hot pot was there. Could this guy do magic? It seemed nothing could stop him. Before Sui could fully process it, Zhou Jinchuan came in. Is it what you wanted? Sui nodded. Yep. So, we're eating tonight. Works for me. Are you free tonight? I'm free. I'll tell the people at the canteen, and I'll get back early. Zhou Jinchuan nodded and went back outside to work. Sui decided to use her free time to prep the lamb. She cut the lamb up and put the bones into a big pot to make soup. After that, Sui went to the yard and picked a basket of cilantro, spinach, and cabbage. She also grabbed 2 radishes to shred and make into fried radish balls. She'd buy any other ingredients she needed from the canteen later. While she was working, Xia Xiaojun smelled the food and got a burst of energy. Soon, everyone had finished making the briquettes. The yard was full, with just a small path to walk on. Then, some went off to the army, and others went to school. After frying the radish balls, Sui went back to the canteen to work. The once busy courtyard was quiet again. That evening, Yi Xiaowu and Yi Nuanyuan were the first to come home. They immediately started helping Sui wash the vegetables. Sui prepped everything she could at the canteen, and after the dinner rush, she said her goodbyes and headed home. Before leaving, she bought some fresh meat, tofu, and other veggies from the canteen. As soon as she stepped outside, the north wind hit her. Sui bundled up tighter, and the thought of the hot pot made her feel a little warmer. She hurried home and started chopping the meat for dumplings. She'd make egg dumplings to add to the hot pot, otherwise the guys might not get enough meat. She rolled out some noodles to boil as a side. With the dishes prepped, Zhou Jinchuan and Xia Xiaojun rushed back. Sui, is the hot pot ready? It's freezing out. Sui called out, almost done. Just need to light the charcoal. Zhou Jinchuan came in. I'll take care of it. With the copper pot on the table, the door was closed, the cold wind was shut out, and only warmth remained. The 3 adults and 2 kids sat around the square table and started enjoying the hot pot. Yi Xiaowu and Yi Nuanyuan were eating hot pot for the first time. They were sweating and eating non-stop. Uncle, is all hot pot this good in Beijing? Zhou Jinchuan smiled. I don't know, but I'll take you to try it in Beijing sometime, and you can decide. The kids were thrilled. Xia Xiaojun said, Captain, take me along when you go back to Beijing next time. I want to see the world. Zhou Jinchuan nodded. Sure, there'll be a chance. Then, he glanced at Sui. She was focused on eating her dumplings, saying nothing. The charcoal fire was hot, and a sheen of sweat was on her nose. Zhou Jinchuan looked away and put another dumpling on each child's plate. Eat up. When they were done, Sui scooped all the lamb out with a spoon and made sure everyone got some. Then, she put noodles in the pot. While they waited for the noodles to cook, Sui said to the kids, "I'm going to be rehearsing with Xiaoqin starting tomorrow, so I'll be home later. Don't wait for me downstairs. Come find me when you're free." Yi Xiaowu nodded. "What's a rehearsal? I've never heard of it." Sui explained about the New Year's Day performance. To keep expectations low, she said it was just a formality. The kids were still excited and said they'd come early to get good seats. Xia Xiaojun cheered. "Captain, you should go too. Let's root for Sui together." Zhou Jinchuan said, "When have I ever backed down from something like this?" Xia Xiaojun blinked. He was sure Zhou Jinchuan wasn't going to go earlier. How did things change so fast? Maybe he'd misheard. Guess I misremembered. Xia Xiaojun changed the subject. "Hey, Sui, I think it's getting colder. You've been busy. After the briquettes are done, I can help you move them to the dorm." Sui waved her hand. "No, I'll move them myself when I get back one night." Zhou Jinchuan spoke up. "Just give me the key, and I'll move them while everyone's at work." Sui didn't feel like arguing with him. "Then, could you just put them on the porch?" Luckily, she lived at the end of the hall, and there was space outside to store the briquettes so they wouldn't have to come inside. Zhou Jinchuan held out his hand. "We need to move the stove too. Can't leave that outside." He wiggled his fingers slightly. "And you have the key to our place too." Seeing the sudden tension, Zhao Xiaojun picked up a bowl of noodles and started eating quietly. Sui took a spare key off her key ring. "Thanks for your help." Zhou Jinchuan took it. "You're welcome." Chapter 62 How did Captain Zhou become the Snail Girl? You are listening at novelfull.audio. 2 days went by. The more Sui thought about it, the more something felt off. Zhou Jinchuan asking for his key back that night seemed strange. She only had it to help with his kids now and then. Even though he said it was to move stuff, something still didn't sit right. But Zhou Jinchuan was a trustworthy guy, so, after a few days, she mostly forgot about it. Then one day, Sui and Su Xiaoqin finished rehearsal after work. They noticed the wind picking up outside, like it was about to pour, so they rushed back. When they got to the dorm and opened the door, the place looked totally different. Stuff had appeared out of nowhere. Sui glanced outside and saw stacks of honeycomb briquettes neatly arranged at the end of the hallway. They were covered with tarps to keep them dry. Confused, Sui shut the door and took a closer look inside. There was a new low table and 2 stools and 2 brand new cans of malted milk on the table. Next to the table was the stove she'd bought, with charcoal burning red. No wonder it felt warmer in here, and the kettle on the stove was new and full of water. Sui immediately thought of the key she'd given Zhou Jinchuan. He must have done this. Shocked, Sui threw on a jacket and headed out. She found Zhou Jinchuan reading in his study. The kids were already asleep. He looked up when he heard her. "What's up?" Sui said. "I just got back to the dorm." "What's with Captain Zhou turning into a fairy godmother?" Zhou Jinchuan frowned. What?" Sui didn't back down. "All that stuff you put in my room. It's too much. I can't just accept it." Zhou Jinchuan said, "Oh, that? I got it for the kids." Sui looked confused. He continued, "It's cold, and they like hanging out in your room. A little table is more convenient. And they don't drink enough water when it's cold. You're always making them malted milk. You should drink some too. I'll get more when you run out." Sui kept a straight face, unable to find a reason to refuse. "Am I reading too much into this? He's just thinking about the kids, right? Okay. That makes sense." Sui paused and said, "So, you used the key then?" Zhou Jinchuan said, "Yeah, I left it on the living room table. I was going to have Xiao Wu bring it over tomorrow." Don't forget it when you leave. Sui, okay. She was overthinking it. Sui started to leave, but Zhou Jinchuan called out, "Hey, your dorm's pretty airtight. Make sure you put the fire out before you go to sleep. Carbon monoxide poisoning is no joke." Sui nodded quickly and thanked him, grabbed the key, and hurried off. After she left, Zhou Jinchuan closed his book, got up, and silently locked the door. With a stove in her dorm, Sui's quality of life improved big time. The room was way warmer and she didn't have to trek to the hot water room every time she wanted a hot drink, besides boiling water. Sui bought a small pot and started making sweet soup and ate treasure porridge after work. She also got some wine yeast and made a big batch of sweet rice wine, sharing it with Sister Yao and Sister Zheng. Sweet rice wine and a poached egg is the perfect combo. A bowl of that in winter warms you right up and gives you an energy boost. Sometimes, Sui would just have a bowl of that for breakfast. All the sweet stuff was making life sweeter, and she was getting too comfy to go out. Yi Xiaowu and Yi Nuanyuan started hanging out at her place all the time, but the kids didn't like the malted milk Zhou Jinchuan bought. They preferred whatever Sui was cooking, so she ended up drinking most of it. It was getting colder, and Sui had finished knitting her sweaters. All that was left was the scarves. Sui planned to knit red ones for herself and the kids, adding a pop of color to the drab northwest winter. Yi Xiaowu noticed she'd made 3 and wasn't planning on making one for Uncle Zhou, so he decided to learn how to knit himself. Sui asked, "Why are you learning to knit?" Yi Xiaowu looked sad. "We're all getting new scarves, but Uncle Zhou isn't getting one. I feel bad for him. I want to make him one." Sui hadn't thought of that. Would Captain Zhou even wear one? That every time she saw him, he was barely dressed, like he didn't feel the cold. It was hard to imagine him wearing a big scarf, but it was sweet of the kid to be so thoughtful, so Sui was supportive and found him some knitting needles and yarn. She patiently taught him how to knit, to avoid making a scarf the same color as his sweater. Sui gave Yi Xiaowu some gray yarn left over from knitting his sweater. He'd be wearing his sweater, so nobody would see the scarf anyway. Yi Xiaowu grabbed the needles and started knitting, but no matter how Sui taught him, his stitches were crooked or too tight. Sui watched him unravel his work a few times and couldn't take it anymore. "Forget it, Xiaowu, just drop it. I'll knit one for him after I finish this one. Then you can say it's your gift." "The thought's the same." Yi Xiaowu was relieved. He happily unraveled all his work. Time flew by, and it was almost New Year's Day. The troops had been preparing, and there was a festive vibe everywhere. The military party was finally here. Before dark, people had already eaten and headed to the auditorium. Sui took the 2 kids and went with Sister Zheng and Sister Yao and their kids. This was Sui's first time at the auditorium, and it was more impressive than she'd imagined. It was still early, and Sui's act was second to last, so she didn't need to be backstage just yet. So Sui sat down with the kids, ready to watch the other acts first. Just before the show started, Zhou Jinchuan and Captain Lu arrived and took seats up front. They were a ways away, but Yi Nuanyuan got too excited and yelled, "Uncle Zhou!" Zhou Jinchuan looked up right away. Sui quickly pulled Nuanyuan down and smiled awkwardly. Luckily, the show started, and everyone's attention turned to the stage, but Sui was getting anxious. The show had started, but where was Su Xiaoqin? Had she chickened out at the last minute? Chapter 63, A Stunning Success. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Sui's heart sank as she waited for Su Xiaoqin, who was nowhere to be found. That evening, Su Xiaoqin had said she was hitting the bathhouse to freshen up before meeting her, but now, with the performance about to start, she was still a no-show. Sui quickly asked Sister Yao and Sister Zheng to watch the kids. She quietly slipped out of the auditorium, heading to the dorm to find Su Xiaoqin. She ran into her right outside the building. Her makeup was a mess from crying. "What happened?" Sui asked, hurrying over. Su Xiaoqin wiped her tears and handed Sui her hulusi. "I found it broken before I left. The reed inside is busted. What am I gonna do? I ran all the way to town to buy a new one, but they don't sell them there." Sui's heart skipped a beat. She pulled Su Xiaoqin backstage. "Don't cry. Let's ask Director Deng if they have one. Wiping her tears, Su Xiaoqin followed Sui backstage. They found Director Deng and explained their problem. Director Deng, do you have a hulusi we could borrow? Before Director Deng could answer, a woman standing next to Bai Ruolin laughed. You think this is a music store? We don't have every instrument. We don't have a hulusi, she continued, maybe the cooks do. Bai Ruolin curled her lip. Don't be silly. All they know about is the stove. Then, putting on a sweet act, Bai Ruolin tried to be helpful. We don't have a hulusi, Comrade Su, but we have violins, accordions, maybe you could switch instruments. Su Xiaoqin's face turned red. She only knew how to play the hulusi. Was this woman deliberately trying to freeze her out? Director Deng gave Bai Ruolin a sour look. The hulusi is a traditional instrument. You shouldn't make fun of it. Then, turning to Su Yi and Su Xiaoqin, she said helplessly, we don't have one here, and it's almost your turn. It's all my fault, Su Xiaoqin said, on the verge of tears. I should have checked my instrument. What are we going to do? I can't play anything else. I'm useless. Director Deng, can someone else accompany Su Yi? Bai Ruolin and the others quickly protested. We're all here to perform. It wouldn't be fair to the rest of us. Director Deng frowned and glanced at her people, feeling embarrassed, but nobody volunteered, and she couldn't force them. How about Comrade Su sing solo? Or, if you don't want to perform, that's okay. There'll be other chances. Su Yi scanned the instruments backstage, and her eyes landed on a guitar. She'd been obsessed with the guitar for a while and taught herself how to play. She could give it a shot, besides, she didn't trust anyone but Su Xiaoqin. She'd rather try herself than rely on them. Everyone was stunned when she asked to borrow a guitar. Do you even know what that is? Bai Ruolin pretended to be helpful. That guitar was just purchased from Shanghai. It's expensive. You'll have to pay for it if you damage it. Ignoring the others, Su Yi looked at Director Deng. I'll be careful with it. Director Deng looked into her eyes. She seemed confident and determined. Somehow, she believed the girl knew how to play. She handed Su Yi the guitar. I hope you play well. I'm looking forward to a great performance. Su Yi smiled and nodded. Thank you. I'll do my best. With the guitar in hand, Su Yi found an empty seat to practice. Su Xiaoqin watched as Su Yi adjusted the guitar. Soon, a beautiful melody filled the air. Her worry turned to joy. You can play the guitar. It sounds amazing. Su Yi smiled. Yeah, but I'm a little rusty. I need to warm up. Su Xiaoqin burst into tears of relief. That's great. Seeing her crying and laughing, Su Yi smiled. Wipe your tears and watch your sister's performance from the audience. And find out who was messing with your stuff while you were showering. It's too weird. I already asked, and nobody saw anything, Su Xiaoqin replied. But it is strange. I'll keep an eye out tomorrow. As Su Yi practiced, Zhou Jinchuan quietly called Xia Xiaojun. Go backstage and find out what's going on. He'd seen Su Yi rush back there with someone. She hadn't returned. Xia Xiaojun went and came back, whispering the story. Su Yi borrowed a guitar and she's practicing. I don't know if she can pull it off. Zhou Jinchuan thought for a moment. Tomorrow, find out how Su Xiaoqin's instrument broke. Xia Xiaojun nodded. Soon, it was time for Su Yi to go on stage. Director Deng came over, afraid she was nervous. Just do your best, Comrade Su. Don't worry. Su Yi had calmed her nerves and refamiliarized herself with the guitar. Thank you, Director Deng. I won't let you down. She confidently walked on stage. Backstage, Bai Ruolin and the others were worried. Does she even know how to play? Maybe. I heard her practicing. It sounded pretty good. Bai Ruolin sneered to herself. So what if she could play a few chords? Brother Qin said Su Yi was tone deaf. She'd be a laughingstock, just wait and see. Sui took a deep breath, walked to center stage with the guitar, and sat on the stool. After adjusting the microphone, her fingers gently strummed the strings. A silky melody filled the auditorium. The night in the naval port is so quiet. As Sui began to sing, the auditorium fell silent. Everyone held their breath, imagining themselves in the quiet night, feeling the gentle sea breeze. When the song ended, the audience exploded into applause. "Bravo!" someone shouted, and the whole audience erupted in cheers. "One more song! One more song!" Sui started to stand, but the cheers grew louder. Chapter 64 Sweet Honey. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Faced with everyone trying to convince her to stay, Sui felt stuck between wanting to leave and wanting to stay on stage. She hadn't played guitar and sung in ages, and even she felt like she was cut short. Then, she looked to Commander Deng for a decision. Commander Deng had been listening to Sui sing backstage, and without realizing it, had walked out into the audience. Seeing Sui look his way, he nodded, signaling she could sing another song. Even he hadn't heard enough. One song wasn't enough. Seeing his approval, Sui smiled, a rare dimple appearing on her cheek. It was so sweet. A bunch of soldiers, who'd never seen anything like it, cheered. "Sing, Sweet Honey." One person started, and everyone jumped on board, agreeing. Commander Deng hesitated. The song's style wasn't exactly army material. He looked to Captain Zhou, Political Commissar Wang, and others in the front row for help. Zhou Jinchuan subtly twirled his fingers and said in a low voice, "It's not every day we have such a good time. The song doesn't matter. Everyone's happiness is what counts." The crowd erupted in cheers. Sui strummed the strings again. This time, her voice was different. It was suddenly gentle and melodious, as if she was singing with complete tenderness. Hearing this, Zhou Jinchuan's heart skipped a beat, then it felt like soft feathers were brushing against his heart over and over. His dark eyes grew even darker, and he kept rubbing his hands on his thighs. He suddenly regretted letting her sing another song. When the next song ended, Sui had had her fill and left the stage. Backstage, Ruolin, who was waiting to perform, suddenly froze. She'd been listening to Sui play and sing. After several years in the art troupe, she'd received plenty of applause herself, but she'd never seen anything as wild as this. Sui's confidence and effortless singing felt like a knife to her heart. She deliberately put herself on after Sui, planning to swoop in for the rescue. She hadn't expected this. Ruolin was stunned, practically ready to throw up. The hand holding her violin was clenched white-knuckled. Finally, Captain Deng approached her. "Aren't you going on? Some people think it's over and are getting ready to leave." Ruolin snapped out of it and rushed onto the stage with her violin. She'd been considered a star of the troupe, with people flocking to see her perform. So when they saw her, the ones who were leaving stayed, but after listening for a while, they found it dull. "It's always the same stuff, foreign music nobody understands. I can't even follow it. So boring. Tell me about it." "That girl who was just singing had way more energy." "Is she new?" "You don't know her. She's the girl who works the window at the casserole noodle place in the cafeteria. But it's understandable if you haven't seen her. It's rare to catch her face." Ruolin was already insecure, and hearing the whispers made her even more upset. She accidentally hit a wrong note. A screech echoed through the auditorium. Faced with the audience's frowns, Ruolin couldn't take it anymore. She ran off crying, violin in tow. Everyone stared after her. Seeing her outburst, Captain Deng arranged for the host to stall, then rushed backstage. He found her crying alone at a table while others tried to comfort her. Captain Deng was furious. "You're crying. You interrupted the performance. Is that professional?" Ruolin, near tears, defended herself. "It's not my fault, they went too far, bullied me. How can I go on after Sui?" Commander Deng sighed. "Bullying you? Didn't you ask to go on after Comrade Su? What do you want? There's always someone better. Are you saying you'll never perform if someone's better than you? Is that your attitude?" Ruolin just cried until she heard about the selection process. Then, she looked up. Captain Deng, I admit Su can sing, but her song choices. We're the army. She was singing about the navy, and then that other song. Captain Deng cut her off. By Ruolin, is that all you've got? Instead of improving yourself, you tear down others. How can you expect to get better? But when Bai Ruolin realized she was being criticized, she panicked. She quickly apologized. I didn't mean it like that, I just thought. Enough. Think about it backstage. Everyone else, let's take our bows. The show was over. Sui won first place by a landslide. Happily clutching her cashmere blanket, she prepared to head home. Commander Deng stopped her. Comrade Su, would you consider joining our art troupe? Despite the short time he'd known her, Captain Deng had quickly pegged Sui as promising. She sang, she played, and she was gorgeous. If she joined, she'd have a great future. Sui had only come for the blanket and never considered joining the troupe. Her plan was to get out, start a business, and make money every day. Though the troupe looked good now, it would soon face changes. And she didn't like the snobby girls. She'd rather go back to the cafeteria. At least she was happy there, so she refused without hesitation. Head Deng was stunned. He took Sui's hand and tried to persuade her. It's late. Go home and think about it. There's no rush. Sui was anxious to get back and see if the kids were waiting. She agreed to think about it, then went backstage to get her blanket. When she got downstairs, everyone was gone. Only Zhou Jinchuan was sitting in the distance with the two kids. Sui hurried over. Xiao Wu and Wan Wan were asleep. Seeing her, Zhou Jinchuan put Yi Xiaowu on his shoulders and held Yin Wan Wan's hand. Let's go. Sui saw Yi Xiaowu stir and offered to take Wan Wan. Let me. Zhou Jinchuan helped her pick up the blanket. They walked quietly, nobody speaking. Yi Xiaowu and Yin Wan Wan stayed asleep until they were put in bed. Sui walked Zhou back to his room. As she got to the door, Zhou Jinchuan said, "It's late. I'll walk you home." Chapter 65, Celebrating the New Year Together. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhou Jinchuan closed the bedroom door and headed straight for Sui. Let me walk you back. Before Sui could object, he was already out the door. He locked up, and they walked toward the dorm, one after the other. It's snowing. Sui, a southern girl, was thrilled by the sight of big snowflakes and reached out to catch them. Zhou Jinchuan stopped and watched her. Under the dim streetlights, the snowflakes swirled like cottonwood fluff, landing in her hair. Zhou Jinchuan, having grown up in Beijing where it snowed every winter, wasn't as impressed, but Sui was as excited as if she'd never seen snow before. After a moment, Sui remembered Zhou Jinchuan waiting ahead. She hurried to catch up, but the ground was already slick. Her foot slipped. Just as she braced herself for a faceplant, someone grabbed her arm. She straightened up. Thanks. Zhou Jinchuan's lips curved slightly. Ready to head back? Sui nodded quickly. Yep, let's go. She started towards the stairs. It was past curfew, and the hallway and stairs were dark. Halfway up, Sui heard a click and a lighter flickered to life, illuminating the stairwell. Zhou Jinchuan had followed her. Too dark to go alone. I'll take you to your door. Okay, Sui said, and led the way. The short hallway seemed longer than usual. At her door, Sui looked at Zhou Jinchuan, his hair and shoulders dusted with snow, the lighter still in his hand. Feeling awkward, she offered, "Want to come in and warm up with some hot water?" He hesitated, then said, "Sure." She hadn't turned off the heat, so the room was warm. Sui took off her damp coat, revealing a gray sweater. She grabbed a clean towel and handed it to him. Here, dry off. Zhou Jinchuan glanced at the gray sweater and thought it looked familiar. Then he remembered the gray scarf Xiao Wu had given him the day before. It clicked. He took the towel, drying his head, a smile playing on his lips where she couldn't see. Sui poured 2 glasses of hot water from the stove and placed them on the table. Drink this first. Zhou Jinchuan hummed, sat down, and pointed to 2 bottles on the table. What are those? Rice wine, Sui answered. I made it myself. No drinking in the dorms. This is rice wine. It barely counts as alcohol. Zhou Jinchuan chuckled. Okay, okay. Sui raised an eyebrow, a little annoyed by his tone. She grabbed a cup, poured half, and offered it. Try it. It's barely alcoholic. It's more like a drink. Zhou Jinchuan's eyes twinkled. Trying to bribe me to get you off the hook, Sui laughed nervously. Never mind, then. She reached for the cup, but he took it first and tasted it. Not bad. Pleased by his approval, Sui smiled. Want me to heat it up? No, it's good cold. Seeing how much he liked it, Sui suddenly wanted some herself. Besides, she hadn't eaten much before rushing out. She poured half a cup for herself. It really is good. Zhou Jinchuan asked with a smile, is this like tooting your own horn? It's the first time I've had it. I've never made it this good before. Sui had planned to enjoy a quiet drink when she got back that evening. It was almost New Year's Eve. After all, she'd even made a pot of braised meat as a snack. She hadn't expected to invite Zhou Jinchuan in. Drinking together was more fun than drinking alone, plus, it was snowing outside. Sui was feeling good. I also have some braised meat here. Want some? Zhou Jinchuan looked at the pot and nodded. Sure. He'd smelled it earlier and was too shy to ask. Seeing that he wasn't holding back, Sui put the pot on the stove to warm. Xiao Wu and Wan won't wake up, will they? Have you ever seen them wake up in the middle of the night? Good point. They chatted, and Sui put the pot on the table. Try it. It's got shiitake mushrooms, quail eggs, duck gizzards, wing tips, and potato slices. She'd wanted to braise pig's trotters, but couldn't find any. Otherwise, that would be a little embarrassing. With appetizers, they quickly finished off a bottle of rice wine. Sui felt a little buzz, but didn't want to stop drinking openly. I think I'm getting drunk from the rice wine, she said. How about you? Feeling anything? Zhou Jinchuan glanced at her, his eyes dark, and muttered, You're such a pain. Sui didn't hear him. What was that? Nothing. They looked at each other, the air suddenly thick. Zhou Jinchuan fidgeted with his fingers and changed the subject. I heard Deputy Company Commander Qin and Comrade Bai are getting married in a couple of days. Did they come to you at the cafeteria? Yeah, but we couldn't agree on a price, so they went with Chef Wang. Good. They're getting married. You seem happy. Sui blinked. Really? Is it that obvious? I guess I am. I'm just happy to celebrate this event. I'm not just happy, you should be happy too. After all, I can finally help you get rid of Bai Ruolan's entanglement for the rest of your life. After their wedding, I'll retire. Maybe I can leave. Zhou Jinchuan kept his head down and smiled until she said she would leave. He suddenly looked up. Leave? Where? Before he could ask, someone knocked on the door. Sui, you in there? Sui and Zhou Jinchuan exchanged glances. Qin Yinfeng. Why was he here? Sui didn't want to answer, afraid he'd wake the others, so she whispered, I'm asleep. Talk tomorrow. Qin Yinfeng wouldn't give up. He called her name softly. I need to talk to you. Sui was annoyed, but she got up, opened the door a crack, and whispered, What is it? Can I come in? No. Qin Yinfeng stared at Sui. Back then. Forget the past. Get to the point. Qin Yinfeng's heart sank. I'm getting the marriage certificate with Bai Ruolan tomorrow. That's it? Chapter 66 finally got the certificate. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After Qin Yinfeng finished talking, he stared at Sui, searching for any sign of panic. He found none. He was stumped. He'd watched her shine on stage at the auditorium, seen the awe in the eyes of his buddies. That's when regret hit him like a ton of bricks. This amazing woman could have been his. He'd been too blind to see it. After the show, people were whispering about how he traded a diamond for a dime. He'd planned to spend New Year's Eve with Byruolin, but after the party, he suddenly couldn't stand the thought of it. He bailed and went back to the dorm, but the more he thought, the worse he felt. That's when he finally worked up the nerve to come see Sue and lay his feelings on the line. If she didn't take him back, he wouldn't go through with the wedding. He laid all this out for her. Sue just stared at him for a second, then blew up. "Qin Yinfeng, are you out of your mind? We're supposed to get married tomorrow." That she wanted to yell at him, but she kept her voice down, not wanting to be overheard. To Qin Yinfeng, though, it just sounded like she was mad, but maybe, just maybe, reconsidering. "I messed up, Sue. I regret it. I've always been thinking about you. Please, just give me another chance." Sue slammed the door in his face. "This is a disaster. Qin Yinfeng's lost it. Is the wedding off? We worked so hard to get them together. Are we back to square one?" Sue panicked. She thought that once they were married, the story's plot would change, and she might be able to get back to her old life. Even if she couldn't, at least she wouldn't end up as badly as before. If they didn't get married tomorrow, all her efforts might be for nothing. That's why she was freaking out, but Qin Yinfeng just figured she was shaken up and sad. He doubled down, squatting by the door and whispering sweet nothings through the crack. Sue was worried about the gossip and couldn't figure out how to shut him down. Meanwhile, Zhou Jinchuan, who she'd been hiding, was listening behind the door. His face darkened. He yanked the door open, his anger barely contained, but his voice calm as ever. "It's freezing out here. Why don't you come inside and talk?" Qin Yinfeng, still squatting, yelped when he heard a man's voice from inside. He looked up and saw Captain Zhou. He practically fainted. "Captain Zhou? What are you doing here?" He shot Sue a disbelieving look. You two are together." Sue rolled her eyes. "None of your business. Still want to come in?" That what he'd thought was his for the taking had turned into a den of wolves. No way was Qin Yinfeng going in there. He realized Zhou Jinchuan had probably heard everything. He bolted. Zhou Jinchuan watched him run, then turned to Sue. "I'm heading out. Don't forget to put out the stove." Sue grunted and slammed the door. Zhou Jinchuan followed Qin Yinfeng downstairs and cornered him in the shadows. "Nice night, huh? Deputy Company Commander Qin probably won't be able to sleep after all that. How about we head over to the field and get some exercise?" Qin Yinfeng looked up at the sky. "Now. Let's go." At the field, Zhou Jinchuan took off his jacket and stretched. The rice wine had him fired up, and he barely noticed the cold. An hour later, Zhou Jinchuan slowly put his jacket back on. "You doing okay, Deputy Company Commander Qin? It's too dark to see. I might have been going a little hard on you. Maybe we should call it a night." Qin Yinfeng struggled to his feet. "I'm fine." "You sure? Won't affect your ability to say, 'I do,' tomorrow, will it?" "No, I'll be there. Then I'll be there to raise a glass to you." Zhou Jinchuan left. He couldn't resist taking one last look at Sue's place. Seeing the lights were out, he finally went home. Back at his place, Xiao Wu and Muan Muan were sleeping like logs. Zhou Jinchuan quietly closed the door and went back inside. After Zhou Jinchuan left, Qin Yinfeng collapsed on the ground. He lay on the cold concrete, the snow falling on him. He was too numb to feel it, but not as numb as he felt inside. After a while, he staggered to his feet and headed back to the dorm. The next morning, Qin Yinfeng mechanically put on the clothes he'd laid out. He washed up like a zombie and went to find Byruolin. She'd cried all night after getting back last night, and her eyes were all puffy. She was trying to ice them. When she saw Qin Yinfeng, she hurried to pack her things and went downstairs. She gasped when she saw him. "What happened to your face?" Qin Yinfeng mumbled. "Slipped on the ice last night. Didn't see where I was going. Banged myself up." Byruolin had been in a foul mood, but seeing him like this, she felt a little sorry for him. You still want to go get the marriage license today? Qin Yinfeng didn't answer for a second. Then, thinking of last night, he said, yeah, let's go. You got any makeup? Cover me up. And your eyes are all swollen. Cover them up too, by Roland. Everything was going wrong, and they were both having second thoughts, but they'd gone this far. There was no turning back. Finally, they went to get the license together. They'd planned to go to the studio for wedding photos and then hit a fancy restaurant for a celebratory dinner. No way they were doing wedding photos now, and they weren't exactly in the mood for a fancy dinner, either. They got the license and rushed back to the compound to get ready for tomorrow's reception. Sui had been on edge all day. It wasn't until Deng, the head of the cultural troupe, dropped by and confirmed. The two had tied the knot that Sui finally relaxed. Deng was still trying to recruit Sui for the troupe. You were born to sing. It's a waste. Sui gave her a bowl of casserole. Try this. I was born to cook. Singing's just a hobby. Deng sighed. You're one of a kind. It's a shame. But you're right, you can be great at anything you put your mind to. They were laughing, eating in the cafeteria when Qin Yinfeng and Bai Roland stormed up, looking furious. Sui, what's with them? Why are they here, and why are they so mad? But it looked like they weren't coming for her. They were after Captain Deng. Chapter 67. The yard was not divided. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Captain Deng saw them marching toward him, looking ready to explode. He told Sui, go on with your work. This won't affect you. But Sui, dying to know if they'd actually tied the knot, wasn't about to leave. I'll stick around, she said. As the pair approached, Captain Deng cut to the chase. Didn't you two just go to get your marriage license? What's the rush back? Qin Yinfeng, noticing Sui, clammed up. We got the license, he mumbled. Bai Roland, not daring to unleash her fury on Captain Deng, just shot daggers at Sui. Showing off for the boss again, huh? You just know how to brown nose. Sui shrugged, like, what are you gonna do? Captain Deng slammed his hand on the desk. Bai Roland, why the attitude? I asked Sui to join the art troupe, not the other way around. Bai Roland, instantly losing sight of her own agenda, blurted out, but we don't need anyone else in the troupe. Who says? Captain Deng gave her a look that could kill. Alright, since you're all here, I'll be blunt. Someone saw you sneaking into Comrade Su's dorm the night her Hulusi got wrecked. Bai Roland's face went white. That's a lie. I didn't. Captain Deng scoffed, you know the truth. While we can't prove anything, your performance last night shows you're not ready for a promotion. You need a few more years to hone your skills. Bai Roland had hoped Captain Deng's words were just heat-of-the-moment anger. She thought she was a shoo-in for the promotion. Now, this? Qin Yinfeng rushed to her side, helping her out. Don't sweat it, he said. If it doesn't happen this time, there's always next time. Bai Roland gritted her teeth. What do you know? If Sui joins the art troupe, do you think he'll ever give me the time of day again? Qin Yinfeng muttered. She didn't say she was joining. Bai Roland stared at him, incredulous. Like Sui would pass up this kind of chance. And I asked if she could sing, and you said she was tone deaf. What was that about? Qin Yinfeng didn't like her trashing Sui. Besides, singing or not, she shouldn't have trashed someone's instrument, which almost caused a huge mess. Even though Qin Yinfeng was disappointed in her, he didn't want to argue on their wedding day and become the laughingstock of the community, so he caved. Okay, let's drop it. Didn't we come to see Captain Deng about housing? Why didn't you bring it up? Bai Roland hissed, are you kidding me? After the way she came at me just now? I wouldn't dare complain to her about housing. So, what do we do? Bai Roland took a deep breath. Let's go see Commissar Wang. As soon as they got to his office, Bai Roland started crying. Commissar Wang, seeing her swollen eyes, tried to comfort her. Shouldn't you be celebrating your marriage today? Why are you crying? Bai Roland sobbed, We just got the license and went to get the keys, and they gave us a 2-bedroom apartment with no bathroom. Commissar Wang frowned. That's more than enough. What else do you want? Bai Ruolin stared in disbelief. Didn't you promise us a yard last time? Commissar Wang pursed his lips. You're not getting promoted now, and Qin Yinfeng's just a deputy company commander. You're not qualified for a yard. And what you did yesterday? Do you think that just goes away? Someone reported you this morning. At this moment, you still want a yard? Commissar Wang slammed the table. These two are nothing but trouble. Qin Yinfeng pulled Bai Ruolin out the door again as they passed Zhou Jinchuan's office. He glanced inside. Has he had something to do with all these things since last night? Qin Yinfeng shivered and dragged Bai Ruolin away. Cheer up. At least we got the license. Let's move our stuff and clean up. We'll have people over tomorrow. That did not sit well with Bai Ruolin. Who are we going to have over? Do you even have the nerve to invite people over to that dump? After trying to calm her down all day, Qin Yinfeng was worn out. Fine. Do what you want. We can move tomorrow. He stormed off. Back at the captain's office, Sui sent Captain Deng away. Finally, she started humming to herself. Since Qin Yinfeng and Bai Ruolin had gotten their marriage certificate, it meant the plot had changed. She felt relieved. To make sure they could have a good wedding, Sui went to Chef Wang before leaving work. Chef Wang, are you busy? The banquet hasn't been called off, has it? Chef Wang rolled his eyes. You wish, don't you? But no, it's still on. Deputy Company Commander Qin came himself to tell me to be ready for the banquet tomorrow at noon. Sui left smiling. Chef Wang was confused. Is she so upset she's lost it? Her ex throwing a party, and she's happy about it. The next day, Sui and the 2 children had the day off. Sui slept like a log, warm under her wool blanket. It also didn't cost her anything. After getting enough sleep, she got up to wash. She wasn't going to bother with breakfast. She wanted to make sure to get her 20-cent red envelope back at the party. Sui went downstairs to find the kids. Zhou Jinchuan had also been invited and would be sitting at the head table. The children shouldn't bother him, so she figured they could tag along with her. When Sui got to the courtyard, Yi Xiaowu was tearing the place apart, looking for something. Sui asked what he was looking for. Sister Su, perfect timing. Uncle Zhou's hurt his hand. Do you remember where the antiseptic is? Chapter 68. Let's go to a wedding. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Sui heard Zhou Jinchuan had hurt his hand, she rushed to grab the first aid kit from the living room cabinet. Turning to Yi Xiaowu, she asked, how bad is it? It looks rough, but Uncle says he's fine and doesn't need anything on it. Maybe you could talk to him. He'll listen to you. Sui glanced toward the study. She realized Zhou Jinchuan was still home. He'd seen her, too. Pretending she hadn't noticed, Sui grabbed the antiseptic and knocked on the study door. Captain Zhou, Xiao Wu said you hurt your hand. Zhou Jinchuan looked up. It's nothing, just a little scratch. Sui walked over for a closer look. It really was just a scratch. It's cold out. It'll get infected if you don't take care of it, and it'll take forever to heal. Let's clean it and bandage it up. Just like Xiao Wu predicted, Sui had barely finished speaking before Zhou Jinchuan obediently held out his hand. Okay, fine. Sui blinked, surprised, then quickly opened the bottle and disinfected the wound. She grabbed some gauze, wrapped it a few times, and tied it off with a bow without even thinking. Captain Zhou, how'd you do this? She remembered him being perfectly fine when she left last night. Did he break his hand walking a few steps? Zhou Jinchuan grinned. Nothing. I ran into Deputy Commander Qin last night. He couldn't sleep, so we hit the playground for a bit. Sui bit her lip, trying not to laugh. So that's why Qin Yinfeng's face looks like a Jackson Pollock painting today. Too bad I missed it. Zhou Jinchuan was drinking water and nearly choked. Sui asked quickly, Captain Zhou, you okay? Zhou Jinchuan coughed. Yeah, fine. You wanna go with me at noon? Sui waved her hands. No way. The three of us are meeting up with Yao and Zheng. Zhou Jinchuan grunted. Alright, it's still early. We'll go later. Sui agreed and went to find Yi Xiaowu and Yi Nuanyuan. It had snowed again last night. The yard was buried, with just a path shoveled out. Uncle started shoveling this morning, then just stopped and said he'd leave it. Yi Xiaowu looked confused, probably thinking his uncle stopped because he hurt his hand. Sui smiled. It's been so long since we've had a good snow. A shame to shovel it all away, isn't it? How about a snowball fight? Snowball fight? Yes, Sui couldn't wait. She pulled off her gloves, scooped up a handful of the fluffy snow, packed it into a snowball, and tossed it at Xiaowu. Yi Xiaowu immediately retaliated, making a snowball and throwing it at Sui. Yi Nuanyuan just stood there, until Sui shoved a snowball into her hand, then she excitedly threw it at Xiaowu, giggling when she hit him. Zhou Jinchuan heard the laughter and walked out of the study. He stepped into the living room and saw the three of them running around the yard, chasing each other. His eyes followed them, a flicker of warmth in them. Sui fit right in, playing with the kids. His heart skipped a beat. She was only 20. She acted so mature, people forgot how young she was, but she was only 20, he was 26, they say 3 years is a generation gap. Was he getting old? Zhou Jinchuan, feeling insecure about his age for the first time, quietly turned back inside and went to the kitchen to boil water. The three kids were wrapping up. He went out and called, "Don't play too long, or you'll catch a cold." Sui heard him and stopped. She'd been having so much fun, she'd lost track of time. She pulled Yi Nuanyuan inside, a little embarrassed. They walked in and saw 3 steaming mugs of hot cocoa on the table. Drink it while it's hot to warm up. Sui felt even more awkward and quickly thanked him. They drank the cocoa. Sui told Yi Xiaowu to change his clothes, and she took Nuanyuan to change, too. Captain Zhou, we're gonna head next door to see Yao. Zhou Jinchuan stood up. Okay, I'll be back later. The three of them walked next door hand in hand. Zheng and her kids were already at Yao's house. You're here. We were just about to call you. Yao hesitated. Su, are you really gonna go to their wedding party? I don't think you should. They're probably up to no good. Sui smiled. They came all the way to invite me. I have to go. It'll be fine. Yao nodded. All right. You can sit with us and ignore those 2 jerks. They left the family housing area and walked to the cafeteria. They could see Bai Ruolan from a distance, dressed in a red wool coat, her face caked in makeup. She was with Qin Yunfeng, greeting people at the door. When they saw Sui, their smiles vanished. Bai Ruolan scoffed. I didn't think she'd show her face. Whatever. She and Qin Yunfeng had the marriage certificate. Sui wouldn't dare cause trouble. She could just watch and accept reality. Qin Yunfeng felt his heart clench when he saw Sui. You came. Yao and Zheng saw him staring at Sui and rolled their eyes. They shoved their red envelopes at him, annoyed, and tried to pull Sui inside. Sui took out her own red envelope. It's not much, but I hope you like it. I wish you a happy marriage and a baby soon. Qin Yunfeng took it, surprised. Bai Ruolan snatched it away in anger. She opened it. 2 cents. I knew she was up to no good. Is she trying to make me mad? Qin Yunfeng frowned. She's just a girl living here alone, and she has a lot of expenses, so don't bother about it. Bai Ruolan squeezed the 2 cents in her hand. Why are you sticking up for her again? I'm not. I just don't want to argue over stupid things. Don't forget, today is our special day. You know it's a special day, then stop mentioning her. You think I want to? You're the one who insisted on inviting her. Sui led the kids into the cafeteria and went to the corner. All the older women and children from the housing area sat here. It would be more relaxed for them. They sat down and started snacking on melon seeds, and then Lu came over with Qiangqiang and Liang. Hey, Lu. You wanna sit with us? Lu looked down and saw it was Su Yi. She quickly rolled her eyes and found a seat far away. She'd already had enough trouble because of Su Yi. Only a fool would sit at the same table and ask for more. Chapter 69, Rebirth on the Wedding Night. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After a while, all the guests had arrived and were ready to eat, but the bride and groom were still arguing at the door. Someone want to talk me out of this? You keep this up, the food's gonna get cold. Here comes Captain Zhou. Everyone knew that the couple wouldn't dare argue with Zhou Jinchuan around. Sure enough, Zhou Jinchuan walked in, and the bride and groom followed close behind. As soon as the food was served, the canteen was buzzing with chatter. Zhou Jinchuan was given the place of honor, next to Camp Commander Liu. Bai Ruolin and Qin Yunfeng came over after making the rounds. Someone, feeling brave, started teasing Qin Yunfeng without missing a beat. Congratulations, Deputy Company Commander Qin. We saw Comrade Su enjoying her meal. What's done is done. You two should make it work and cut out the bickering. Su Yi was happily munching on a chicken leg in the corner. Bai Ruolin's smile froze. Qin Yunfeng tried to smooth things over. Eat up, everyone. Sorry we're not better hosts today. Bai Ruolin, remembering that this was her event, bit her lip. Don't listen to them, folks. We were just disagreeing about decorating the new place. And Comrade Su? She's doing great and will be joining the performance troupe soon. Why would she still be interested in our old Qin? Not worried at all. She grabbed Qin Yunfeng's arm. Right? Qin Yunfeng just pursed his lips, but someone nearby started laughing. You haven't heard? Comrade Su turned down the art troupe. Everyone's bummed about it. Bai Ruolin felt a surge of happiness. She really didn't go. The happiness quickly turned to annoyance. How could she pass up such a great opportunity? Suddenly, Bai Ruolin stopped offering tea and dragged Qin Yunfeng to their seats to eat. Everyone grabbed their chopsticks. Just as Zhou Jinchuan reached out, Camp Commander Liu choked and spat out his tea. Luckily, he caught himself before spraying the food. Lao Zhou, what's with the gauze? You're looking sharp. Zhou Jinchuan just glanced at him. Eat. Qin Yunfeng, sitting across from them, noticed the bow on Zhou Jinchuan's hand. He immediately realized that Su Yi had done that for him. His heart sank. He couldn't help but feel bitter. How could Captain Zhou actually fall for her, with her background? It was probably just a passing thing, and it would all be for nothing. She'd regret it someday. He, on the other hand, would have a good life with Bai Ruolin. During Spring Festival, he'd take Bai Ruolin back home to show her off to the whole village, and throw a proper wedding banquet in the village. Then they'd have a big, healthy son, and his mother would come help take care of him. With his mother there, he and Bai Ruolin could focus on their careers. It was only a matter of time before they got promoted. Su Yi would be crying and begging him to come back then. Thinking about it, Qin Yunfeng suddenly felt a lot better. After the banquet, he immediately helped Bai Ruolin move their stuff into the new house. Bai Ruolin, seeing how hard Qin Yunfeng was working, was still annoyed. He was sweating so much from cleaning the new house that he was down to just a light coat. Even in winter, he was treating her much better than before, and that made her feel a little relieved. She looked around the new place. It wasn't as nice as the independent houses, but it was a 2-bedroom apartment, much better than the 4-person dorm she'd been in. Bai Ruolin was getting happier by the minute. That evening, Qin Yunfeng took the initiative to get some food from the canteen, and they ate together before bed. He thoughtfully brought her water to soak her feet. Bai Ruolin felt increasingly smug. Marriage had really changed him. Whatever happened before didn't matter. From now on, he'd only care about her. She reached out and hugged his waist. Yunfeng, you're so good to me. Let's make this work. Qin Yunfeng paused, then turned off the light and carried her to bed. In the middle of the night, Bai Ruolin had a nightmare. It nearly suffocated her, like someone was strangling her. When she woke up, she was drenched in sweat. She fumbled for the light and stared at the calendar on the table. The date was January 2nd, 1981. Had she been reborn? Bai Ruolin was initially overjoyed, but then she looked to the other side of the bed. There was the face she least wanted to see. She was actually married to Qin Yunfeng. Bai Ruolin felt bile rising in her throat. In her past life, she'd been tricked by this man too, thinking he was an honest guy she could trust. Only after they were married did she realize that his honesty and thoughtfulness were just an act. He was calculating and cold. She had happily married him, but all she got in return was being used, and a mother-in-law and sister-in-law she couldn't get rid of. She couldn't live like that, so she started putting drugs in her mother-in-law's food. Eventually, the old woman got sick and was sent back home, and her annoying sister-in-law was married off to some remote place after her mother-in-law got sick. After finally getting rid of them, Qin Yunfeng found out what she'd done. They fought constantly after that. During their last argument, she threatened to divorce him and ruin his career, but Qin Yunfeng refused, and they started fighting behind closed doors. She remembered Qin Yunfeng grabbing her neck, his eyes red, like he wanted to kill her. She struggled, and she thought she was dead, but instead, she'd been reborn. The worst part was, she was reborn on her wedding night with Qin Yunfeng. How awful. Bai Ruolin gritted her teeth and swallowed the bitter taste in her mouth. She didn't want to face Qin Yunfeng's fake smile. The thought of what she'd just done with Qin Yunfeng made her sick to her stomach. In her previous life, she and Qin Yunfeng got married at the end of 1981. How was it the beginning of the year now? Bai Ruolin clutched her head, which was throbbing, and it took her a while to calm down. Then she realized what had changed. Everything was different this time around, and it all started with that bitch Su Yi. Since she came to the army, everything had changed. In her previous life, she'd had a huge fight with Qin Yunfeng when she found out Su Yi was coming. Qin Yunfeng hadn't even let her into the army, and had sent her back home. Not only that, she remembered that Su Yi was supposed to be marrying some old, twice-divorced farmer at this time. She had forced Qin Yunfeng to make it happen, but why was she still here now? And why was she involved with Zhou Jinchuan? Chapter 70 Divorce. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As it turned out, Zhou Jinchuan wasn't just competent, he came from an unbelievably powerful family. Bai Ruolin only learned this a few years later when everyone was back in Beijing. The weird thing was, he was still single after being back in Beijing for years. She regretted her past actions. Back in the army, she'd thought he was too strict and unapproachable. If she'd known about his background, she would have gone after him, even if it meant chasing him relentlessly. Now, after being reborn, she knew the truth. But she was already married and had slept with the most repulsive man. The thought made Bai Ruolin vomit blood. Qin Yunfeng, startled, sat up immediately. What's wrong? He asked. His face went pale when he saw the blood on the sheets. Ruolin, why are you throwing up blood? He reached out to help her, but Bai Ruolin recoiled, disgusted. Don't touch me. Qin Yunfeng, thinking she was worried about getting him dirty, said quickly, it's too late for that. I'll take you to the infirmary. Bai Ruolin scoffed. I think you're dirty. Qin Yunfeng stared at her, stunned, then touched her forehead. What's wrong with you? Bai Ruolin turned away angrily. Qin Yunfeng, let's get a divorce. Are you out of your mind? Qin Yunfeng blurted out. He'd been worried about her health, but her immediate demand for a divorce caught him off guard. He realized his mistake immediately and corrected himself. I know you're sick and not feeling well. I'll take you to the doctor. Bai Ruolin sneered and lay back down. I'm not going anywhere. You're probably hoping I die so you can take advantage of my family. Qin Yunfeng, having tried to be patient, finally lost it. The last bit of concern he felt vanished. I think you're the one who's sick in the head. He turned and lay down, seeing his reaction chilled Bai Ruolin. In her past life, they'd pretended to be a loving couple for years. Now, on their wedding night, he couldn't even fake it for a single day. Great, Bai Ruolin lay awake all night, replaying the events of her past life and comparing them to this one. At dawn, she got up, washed her face, and got dressed. Qin Yunfeng, who had slept soundly, couldn't remember the details of the previous night. Seeing her composed expression, he asked tentatively, how are you feeling? Do you want to go to the infirmary? Bai Ruolin had calmed down. She knew starting a fight right now wouldn't do her any good. She replied calmly, okay, let's get some breakfast first. We can go together later. I think I had a nightmare last night. I was stuck in it. You weren't just talking crazy, were you? Qin Yunfeng was taken aback, then relieved. It's okay. I won't hold it against you. They got ready and went to the cafeteria for breakfast. As soon as the infirmary opened, they were the first to see the doctor. After examining her, the doctor found nothing wrong. Maybe it's the heat. Even though you're newlyweds, take it easy. Observe yourself when you get back. Drink plenty of hot water and get some rest. After leaving the infirmary, Qin Yunfeng told her to go back and rest before heading to work. Bai Ruolin watched him leave, then turned and headed for Political Commissar Wang's office. Bursting through the door, she immediately started crying. Political Commissar Wang was bewildered. What's going on? I thought everything was fine at the banquet yesterday. Bai Ruolin sobbed, Uncle Wang, I can't live like this anymore. I want to divorce Qin Yunfeng. What? Are you sick? Political Commissar Wang slammed his hand on the table and stood up, agitated. You just got married. What kind of talk is this? Ridiculous. I think you're just restless and causing trouble all day long. Bai Ruolin cried even harder. Uncle Wang, didn't you think highly of Qin Yunfeng at first? I was young and ignorant before, but now I realize he's not a good match. Political Commissar Wang felt a headache coming on. Don't even think about it. Go back and live your life. If I hear any more of these rumors, I won't be able to protect you. Hearing his harsh tone, Bai Ruolin's face darkened, and she abruptly stopped crying. She felt more and more uneasy. Uncle Wang had always listened to her in her past life, siding with her on everything. He'd even advised her not to marry Qin Yunfeng in the first place, and then told her to divorce him if she couldn't make it work. Why was he acting like this now? Realizing her last hope was gone, Bai Ruolin had no choice but to stand up and leave. She decided to take a long-term approach. As she walked out of the door, she ran into Zhou Jinchuan in the corridor. Bai Ruolin quickly wiped her tears, forced a smile, and called out timidly, Captain Zhou. Zhou Jinchuan walked right past her, not even glancing her way. Bai Ruolin turned and glared at his back, a bitter feeling welling up inside her. If only she hadn't married Qin Yunfeng, she could openly pursue Zhou Jinchuan. Too bad. If she could get a divorce from Qin Yunfeng soon, maybe there would still be a chance. Even if it wasn't possible right away, she could start over after returning to Beijing in 2 years. Leaving the office building, Bai Ruolin stood on the stairs and gazed out at the compound, lost in thought. Now that she couldn't even get past Political Commissar Wang, a divorce was out of the question for the time being. She needed to stabilize Qin Yunfeng first and then come up with a long-term plan. Anyway, with the memories of her past life, she was confident she could live well in this one. Feeling more at ease, Bai Ruolin headed towards the cafeteria. She needed to confront Su Yi, who had brought her nothing but bad luck since she arrived at the compound. Meanwhile, Su Yi and Su Xiaoqin were busy in the kitchen, chatting and laughing. Suddenly, Bai Ruolin appeared like a ghost, silently staring at Su Yi from the doorway. Su Xiaoqin spotted her first. Oh my God, why are you standing there without saying a word? You scared me. Su Yi raised his eyebrows. Is there something you need? Bai Ruolin pursed her lips. Su Yi, come outside. I need to talk to you. No time. I'm working right now. Su Yi refused immediately. Bai Ruolin's eyes filled with hatred. Su Yi, I know my life is miserable because of you. If you don't come out, you'll regret it. Su Yi wasn't going to pay attention to her, but then she mentioned this life. He suddenly felt a pang of alarm. Was Bai Ruolin reborn? Ignoring everything else, Su Yi quickly took off his apron and started to head outside. Seeing this, Su Xiaoqin grabbed him. Su Yi, don't go. I don't trust her. Su Yi reassured him quickly, don't worry, I won't let her get the best of me. He hurried out.